G'day folks, and welcome to another little episode of the Sit Up Live for the Sit Up Challenge. My name's Vaughan McVilly. I'm the General Manager for the Mental Wheels Foundation and heading up the campaign for the Sit Up Challenge starting September 1st. So what is the Sit Up Challenge? The Sit Up Challenge is a campaign that's built to raise funds for clinical research and programs that will help save a life, will reduce the suicide number in this country. The challenge is to do 66 sit-ups for 21 days and invite 6 friends to do the same. Each of you, your goal is to raise just $66. What's with all the sixes? It's not a bloody numbers of the devil or anything like that. Basically what the number is 66. 6 times 66 is 396, and that's exactly the baseline cost for MindSpot to deliver a 8-week program to someone who's suffering from mental adversity. So that will save a life. So that's where our funding goes. It goes towards MindSpot so they can deliver the programs, and also the funding goes to MQ Health and Professor Nick Titov, who I'll be talking to next week, and to his research team who are doing clinical research around the Big Five, which we'll talk about more later in the show. Today, I'm going to be talking to one of the Mental Wheels Foundation family's big supporters. He's got one of the best smiles of any rooster you're ever going to meet. He's a lovely guy. He's a guy by the name of Alex Ross, and I'm going to invite him in now. What he's doing in around mental health, and a little bit about his journey, and basically just get the love. We're currently seeing his blinds. Oh, there he is.
Look at that.
Hey.
Hello, mate.
Hello, brother. What's going on?
Still me best.
Yeah. Well, apparently someone told me you can't piss up.
Yeah. How did you bleep that out then?
Well, that's like a Vaughnism. I've got to press my button all the time not to swear, especially on these things. Hey? Before we get into some of the mental health stuff, let's just give everyone a little bit of an introduction to who you are. Your early passion, and probably still one of your passions, is water skiing. Tell us about growing up and falling in love with being on a plank behind a really powerful boat on water.
Yeah. Look, I mean, just, the growing up part, I think there's, video and photo footage of me water skiing pretty young. It was just one of the things that the family did. So back in the days, you used to be able to ski on the Parramatta River here in Sydney, which is now a pretty toxic place to do anything on. But we water skied on the Hawkesbury River and just socially, and then at a reasonably young age, we started to race competitively. My dad always raced boats and towed skis around, and then I think I did my first, there's a race in Sydney in New South Wales called the Bridge to Bridge, which is from Windsor to Brooklyn. It's 120 Ks, and I did my first one when I was 7. And then that was it. The family kind of just teed off from there, and away we went. Yeah, it was good, mate. It was good. It was lots of travel around New South Wales and then Australia and then eventually the world. It definitely occupied a lot of my youth. Yeah.
So 100+ kilometre skiing race at the age of 7. How long did that take you?
Yeah, well, we didn't finish, but mate, it was the world's most epic storm that year, and we made it only a short distance. But look, I know those numbers seem ridiculous, but it's almost, I guess, I've only recently become involved in cycling, and to hear the numbers that you guys rack up in, on the seat of a bike, for me is staggering. And so I get the correlation there. But to put some numbers around the time, I'll look at, I think I did the first bridge to bridge I finished was a bit over an hour and 15 minutes for the 120 clicks, but by the time you get on in time, the quickest time that I personally ever finished a bridge in was 43 minutes, but they're now doing it in under 40 minutes. Yeah, it's quick.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quick.
Wow.
Yeah, it's next. It's quick.
So, just on that, so navigating the waves of competition, and I guess keeping your mental you know, your focus and keeping the waters calm around you, you know, what were some of the things that you learnt, you know, from that sport that you probably take on today? Like, even though it's an hour, I guess, you know, the last 15, 20 minutes you must be in deep in the hurt bag, your knees and legs and stuff. You know, is there skills that you take through your life from those days that you think have been invaluable?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I was lucky enough to have, at a young age, I had a personal trainer who was really mindful. I didn't know what mindfulness was at the time. And we actually in the mid-90s, we went through a process of just starting to understand where I performed my best. And we just tried really two simple things. We went into a couple of competitions with a really aggressive, ego-based mentality, listening to loud music, you know, getting pumped up, and went out and got towelled up. And then for the couple of competitions after that, we went in with a completely opposite approach of zenned out, meditative, still, calm, and went out and just could not be touched. And so from that point, we learnt that, you know, that's still for me, that stillness, that mindfulness, that gentle, calm approach is what worked for me. I wished I'd applied that to the rest of my life sooner, but mate, you know, from the time I gave up skiing and, you know, when I was 18 or 19, there wasn't a skerrick of mindfulness in me, yeah. But now there is.
Before we get into that, let me ask you a question. You have a business called The Sales Guy, which is obviously not your full-time gig anymore. You're working for Nanowise. Is that what the business is?
Nanotise, yeah, Nanotise, yeah.
But The Sales Guy, one of the things that I was interested in reading about that is it was zero risk. It was totally, basically you were paid on your success. You know, what was your thought process around that business, and how did that come about?
Yeah, probably not a lot of thought went into it, but look, mate, I didn't do well at school. I was a skier, you know, and a clown, and application wasn't there. So as far as qualifications go, I didn't have any. You get told enough that you got the gift of the gab and that you could sell ice to an Eskimo, you end up believing it. And I think for a long period of time there, I probably blamed the world for me not being employable. I can't work for a boss, you know, they don't understand me, and all that rubbish. So I set up a business called The Sales Guy, and yeah, it was basically a gun for hire. And I would take on the risk of selling assets that other businesses couldn't or wouldn't, and then just worked on commission only. So, look, I don't know whether much thought went into it, and did it work? Probably not. There's, you know, it was just one of those mistakes, and I learned a lot. I go out, and you know, I don't know. The Sales Guy is now that there's a new Alex in this world. I don't know whether I really like The Sales Guy, to be honest, because there was a fair bit of inauthenticity around that bloke. If I'm honest, yeah. Well,
let's talk about that, because obviously your handle these days is authenticity. Talking about the old Alex, like I only have been lucky enough really to get to know this Alex in front of me. And for anyone out there, a little backstory is I was having a bit of a shit week and thought I'm just going to go out and ride my gravel bike, because that's where I find, you know, my zen, my place. But I'll go down to the Maroubra Beach, I'll do my little morning meditation, and then I'll go for a zing on my gravel bike. And I just sort of finished my med, and there was this unit running buckets of water from the ocean up to some ice bars, and I'm like, have a look at this, Rooster. But just as that was happening, this amazing freaking sunrise was coming, and so I was like, my God, that's an amazing photo to see this guy with these two huge buckets of water like running up the sand, you know. So I ran down onto the beach and took a photo of him, to which he said, "Are you stalking me, mate?"
Weirdo.
Weirdo. What's this guy doing? We got talking, and obviously I've been into a lot of cold immersion therapies and Andrew Huberman, and I've babbled shit about those guys a lot. So I was in it. I was interested to see what Alex was up to, and next minute we were side by side in ice bars, having a chat, me fully in my cycling kit, and so that's the Alex that I know today, and blessed to do so. Tell us about the old Alex and how and where the, I guess, Phoenix has risen from.
Rising. Probably not there yet. I I reckon, mate, the answer is, probably scared and lost is, and and that was all masked with bravado, confidence, and bullshit, if I'm honest. Yeah, so the old Alex, there's still probably elements of the old Alex in the new one that there's work getting done on. I had a complete inability to create intimacy at any level through fear. So while I guess a lot of people would probably, and the sales guy might be a good example of how good I thought it was at building relationships. But at the end of the day, I didn't have a relationship with myself. Therefore, I struggled to build relationships with others. And that came out in some really, really challenging behaviour, not only for me, but for others. I drank a lot, I partied a lot. I was loud and some would say fun. Now I look back, it was obnoxious and destructive. The old Alex was destructive of self and others, and that would come out in ways that were really damaging. Like certainly the alcohol, but also just food and the way I would train, the way I would go about. I had an all or nothing approach. I still am all or nothing, but the approach and the awareness of that has managed to calm the behaviour down. I think all or nothing for a bloke like me, I can't really avoid it. And if I'm not careful, my all or nothing can come out in the new Alex as well in some what would be classed as maybe healthy ways. But, there's an awareness there around that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I think if I was to maybe condense what that old Alex was confused, unaware, mindless, scared, and full of shit. Yeah.
I think we're pretty similar beings in that place. Was there a turning point, a key turning point for you?
Yeah, there probably wasn't there might not necessarily be a particular occurrence. In retrospect, there were a lot of them that sort of slowly built up over time, and it's maybe that sort of straw that broke the camel's back. I've got to say that the one thing that without I probably wouldn't have made an adjustment is my kids. Yeah. To have them, I guess what I was doing was I was parenting my kids out of fear that they would turn into me because I was so dissatisfied with who I was as a person. So, and what that did is that led to this really poor behaviour as a parent. For parents out there, it's, that saying, there's no book on this stuff. And so what, the turning point for me would be my behaviour as a father. It was starting to impact my kids, and I decided at that point, when I realised that it was actually me that was the problem, then that was really where the change came. Yeah, so not probably one instance, but a raft of them over a period of time.
And then what were the first, I guess, activities and actions that I guess you changed? Obviously, you gave up the booze. Did that happen straight away? Yeah, that was a quick one, mate. Yeah, that was day one. The decision was made November the 6th, 2019. Melbourne Cup had just run, and I said to the boys at a pub in Balmain, I said, "This is it. There's no tomorrow on this. I'm done." And yeah, I hung up the boots there.
you know, on that lifestyle. And while I wasn't drinking every day, I was certainly drinking hard and fast when I was, you know. Yeah, I was out to hurt you and myself. And there was no holding back. And that was getting worse and worse. That behaviour was getting worse and worse. And there were even some of my mates that were identifying that, mate, you're going pretty hard here. Yeah. So that was the first behaviour that I put down. You know what, mate? There was probably something that came up before that. I started to see a shrink. And I think the mindfulness came first. Now that you mention it, you know, I think the mindfulness came before the behaviour. And he was the one. My shrink said to me, I was talking to him about my behaviour, and he said to me, he said, why don't you give up? Why don't you stop drinking? And why? What do you mean? The drinking's not the problem. It's like the people around me, and I've got this going on in my life. If I change that, and he said, well, just see what happens. And I did. And I sort of made it through the first week, and then the second week, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth, and then time just dragged on, and then it actually became a little bit of a personal challenge. Then it's like, okay, well, how long can we go here? What role does it play in my life? Now, you know, what happened next that's really for me when the wheels fell off, because I had at no stage in my life actually been still enough, long enough, without reaching for something. And that window of time allowed for me to understand what it was that I was reaching for. And what I came to learn is that I was reaching for things that were, some of them were healthy. And, you know, if we go back to the scheme, at the age of 13, I had a personal trainer, and I was training 4:30 in the morning and 4:30 in the afternoon. And intensely, you know, like my Monday, at the age of 14, my Monday would be 1,000 squats, 10 sets of 100 squats with an Olympic bar. So 20 kilos on my back, 10 sets of 100, and just hang in there at, you know, 4:30 in the morning before school. Now, what I came to learn is that that's actually that's a mask. That behaviour for me is a mask. It's a tool that I can reach for in order for me to avoid what's actually going on. And what's actually sometimes going on for me is pain, discomfort, uncertainty, lack of self-belief. And if I do things, then I don't have to sit with that discomfort. And the first thing I reckon I was doing as a young fellow was training. And that got put on a pedestal, because next thing, you know, I'm world champion in 1995, and it's all put up in lights. That then just continued. Then that inability to sit with self continued, and then I'm old enough to drink, and then the training is replaced with the drinking. But what hasn't changed is still the inability to sit with self and get honest. So at 42, when I hang up, you know, the schooners and shots of Fireball, for the first time since I'm very, very young, I'm actually dealt with me. And that is literally when the wheels started to fall off for me. Yeah, is after I put everything down that I no longer allowed for myself to pick up. And yeah, mate, alcohol was that. Yeah.
Do you think that the wheels actually fell off, or the wheels, you just realised that, fucking me, I've got to put the wheels back on, and that was the hardest part?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, good metaphor. Because probably what happened is I ended up in pits for the first time to actually get a wheel change. Yeah. You know. Yeah. So I was running around on this set of rims, sideways all the time without any grip. Yeah, just hanging it out there. Yeah, thinking, geez, I'm not doing too bad here. But in reality, yeah, mate, there just needed to be a full overhaul. And it needed to come out root and branch for me. So, yeah, while the wheel nuts, yeah, definitely started to come off, mate, they did. Because those wheels had to come off. Like that old Alex had to just get put to bed entirely. And that, you know, that came over, that took years for me. It's still happening. But what was absolutely required was the death of the ego for me. And with the death of ego came death of fear, acknowledgement of fear. Yeah, mate, epic.
Yeah, wow. It's really interesting because obviously, last week I had this chat with Shannon Malseed, so
Mm, mm,
2018 national champ, right, on the bike, and I asked her a similar question, and her answer was, when I went across the line, I was still the same person. I still had all of the same issues. It
yeah.
didn't matter that I just became the best in Australia and I've got a pro tour contract and off I am going on my dream. All of the things that were going on with her were still there. Like didn't disappear, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. So talking about like sitting in pain,
Mm.
you make me sit through a little bit of pain every Tuesday morning, and I prefaced this little chat by saying how cool Bronte Beach is, and of course I wasn't talking about how smiley and glass-wearing fucking roosters we are. I was talking about the ice bars. How did you get involved in the ice? And tell us that journey and what you're doing now.
You know, I love this. I love that you've asked this, because it's actually, if I just go back a couple of steps, the reason I started this, journey is because of my kids, my behaviour as a father. And what actually happened, how I ended up getting my ass in an ice bath for the very first time is a bit over a year ago, my eldest daughter and family had flown up to Port Douglas for a holiday, and my eldest daughter's quite anxious, and we can pep around the edges of that if we want, or we can go right in. But at the end of the day, she was anxious. I now know she was anxious based on how I was parenting. I was bringing up a fearful kid, and that fear manifests for her in different ways. And for her, it's quite physical, and she can't get into confined spaces. She struggles to get into lifts. There was a period of time there where she wouldn't get into a car unless everyone else was in it and the car was running and ready to go. Aeroplanes are a massive problem for her, and she flew up to Port Douglas, and when she got there, it was horrific for her. And I got the phone call from my wife saying we're not sure how we're going to get her home. They'd just landed there, and it was horrific. And we called a psychologist that we'd been working with, a child psychologist, and we explained to her what was going on. At this point, I'm on Google flat knacker looking for camper vans. I could jump in the van and drive up to Sydney and drive her home. And the psychologist explained to us that perhaps an option would be is that we use this as an opportunity to grow her through it. And the process that was suggested to us, that my wife and I bought into, was controlled trauma. And what was explained to us was that if we could start to work with my daughter on a daily basis, she had 7 days left in Port Douglas. If we worked with her on a daily basis and getting her used to some discomfort, then we might be able to get her on the plane home. And what we ended up doing is that the cold therapy was what was prescribed to us, and that was my first real... I mean, I'd heard of Wim Hof and I'd seen people do it and so on, but it had never been something that I'd really cared too much to learn much about. So basically what was explained to us was that if we get my daughter into some cold water on the days leading up to it and ask her to talk about what goes on inside her body, to start to build a relationship with the fear, then she won't be necessarily... what we're learning here is that she's not scared of the plane. She's scared of the feeling that the plane gives her. And that's a fear. And she's scared of fear. That makes perfect sense to me, because I'm petrified of fear. Because fear for me, when I was a kid, wasn't necessarily dealt with very well. It was pushed away, sent to the bedroom or whatever. Just don't have it, because fear, certainly for children, manifests in sometimes challenging ways. It comes out in poor behaviour, loud screaming, yelling, or whatever, and we know what can happen to kids when they behave that way. And that was what was happening with my daughter. So we decided we're going to go through this process of getting her into cold water therapy. So I filled up my bath. I'm in Sydney and she's in Port Douglas, and we got on a Zoom call together. And if I'm going to put my kids through some cold water therapy, I need to do it myself first. So we set up a Zoom call. I filled up my bath with ice and videoed them in Port Douglas, and did exactly what we were asking her to do, which is I stood in front of the bath, ready to get in it, and went into myself. And I started to articulate to my daughter what was going on for me. And it was I'm like, well, okay. And I got to identify, I got to name the feeling, and the feeling was definitely fear for me. I got to then locate it in my body. And for me, all my fear sits up high, which is why I talk so much. It's why I laugh, and it's why I'm out, right? It's because I'm that's me. Everything's up high for me. I can sometimes feel my fear in my teeth and in my mouth. And then I got to name the colour of it, and then I got to sort of sit with it and then just go to it and then acknowledge it as part of me. I was like, wow, this is new. And then I got in the ice with that in mind. It's just me and my fear getting into the ice. And anyway, so we did this. I did this every day with her. And what ended up happening is I remember I was really vividly, I was driving home from work, and I was really eager to go to the service station and buy some ice to get home, to get in an ice bath. And I'm like, God, this is weird. Like, I remember feeling like this when I was driving home from work and wanting to go to the bottle shop to pick up a six-pack. What is this? And I just hung in there. My body really wanted to do it. A few things then happened to me physically. My skin cleared up. I used to get this like really red sort of rash on my face. I definitely started to cut some weight, and my body felt better. I just felt better. I didn't understand why. You know, so we wind the clock forward. We now know why. We now know, and that's dopamine, right? I was actually releasing healthy levels of dopamine that were prolonging the duration of dopamine that was being released was actually lasting in me for a while. And as we know, this all or nothing approach that I've got, this sort of addiction, this addictive personality, this behaviour for me of this want for more was starting to come out in the want for more. I didn't want more ice bath. I wanted more dopamine, right? So, yeah, I don't know. I can't even remember the question now, but that's how I first got in.
Yeah, you sort of answered it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. If you wind it up, it won't stop. So
Yeah, that's it. That's it. It's just like.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
So what do you like? Let's talk about Bronte Beach and what's happening every Tuesday.
Yeah. So, I go to Bronte Beach every Tuesday. So this is a commitment that I made to myself 12 months ago, and
Yeah, you do.
I said, "That's about it." No.
Yeah, thanks.
And yeah, I mean, why I started down there is because it's bloody good for me. Like, I get to do all the stuff that helps, and I get to look at the sunrise, I get to look at the ocean, I get to do some physical exercise, I get to meditate, do breath work, and sit in an ice bath. And I was doing that all for myself to start with, until blokes like you started to show up and go, "Mate, what are you doing?" And then the invitation just opened up, and now people come down and join us, and it's still there. It's like 12 months on. It's 12 months like next month that we've been going down there every single Tuesday, and it's nice, mate, because it's like-minded people. Some have got struggles and some don't. Some like sitting in ice, some like the meditation, some like the breath work. For me, I get heaps out of it because it's an act of service that I've learned really important to my own mental health and my own well-being is doing for others, you know. And so that's what I do, yeah. And anyone's welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's an unreal. I try to get there as often as I can, and it's an interesting thing because I get into some form of cold therapy. I try to every day, whether that's a cold shower or whatever. But obviously, getting down there and doing it in that environment is probably the most beautiful and spectacular. I mean, it's Bronte Beach. The sun's coming up. You're looking at beautiful people, beautiful nature, and then doing the things that we do. I think it's I often joke to say that if I can, work my life around and I can get down and see Alex on a Tuesday, that'll be my most productive day. And that's that's evident in the research that's slowly but surely coming out.
And while you're sort of rattling and wrapping around some research, what's the research around? Because you've fired off some questions for me, and this sort of acts of service, this like giving back for me is starting to grow some legs for me on what it's doing for my mental health. What does the data say around helping others from a mental health perspective for self?
It's a really good question because, and I've only really personally been diving into this, bizarrely you freak. I watched a video on it, another video on it this morning, because it's very good for you in one way, but it also can be quite bad for you and quite bad for the people around you, because it becomes about the things that you're doing for others. So there is a really fine line of toxicity there. And that's what I'm learning, and I don't know enough about it, and I'm still, I'm personally still researching it and looking into it. As I said, before I jumped on, you jumped on, I've actually got Professor Nick Titov from Macquarie University. He's coming on for a chat like this next Tuesday. And it's definitely one of the questions I've got for him, because I think there's, you talk about the ego, that's probably the line where when you're doing active service, you've really got to keep your ego in check. For me personally, that's how I find it. And listening to you talk, I think we are really similar beasts in that. And so I sometimes struggle with going, stop, wait, why are you doing this? What's the reasoning behind it? Yeah, like you're definitely getting stuff out of it from a mental health point of view, personally. But is it feeding ego or is it feeding something else? And I think that's the line that I'm starting to read. And like, there's some really old literature on it too, which, 5 years ago, you wouldn't have caught me fucking dead reading some of the shit that I read now. Which is exciting.
What would you have been reading?
Well, probably more pictures, mate. Of pretty bikes. Let's just get that clear. So I'm really interested in that. There's two, I guess, parts of the current world that I'm, I guess, from the mental health space that I'm really intrigued in. That's definitely one of them. The other one right now for me that sort of has picked its head up is just what feels like to me personally a ridiculous like everywhere I look, someone's saying they've got ADHD.
Yeah.
And it's like absolutely out of control. The chat that I had a couple of weeks with Nick Titov, he said it's the most I want to say prescribed, but not prescribed. What do you call it when you're diagnosed? Thanks. It's the most overdiagnosed.
Doctor, thank me later.
Yeah, thanks, mate. It's the most overdiagnosed disorder going about. But the word that he used, which I want to talk to him more about next week, is the disorder. It's a disorder of developed countries. There's no ADHD in underdeveloped countries. Yeah. Which is really interesting, right? So I want to find out what that's about. One of the things he said, which was really interesting, is like if you go back through, we're in our 40s, right? And so, there was like a suicide attempt type disorder partner of life, or a lot of self-harm. Then we went through anorexia and people, weight shaming. We've just gone through a gender, issue. And he said the current one for the developed world is, people saying that they or believe that they have ADHD. So they're the two areas that I'm looking to dive down with him.
It's interesting you say that because, I believe that we all need to be medicated. But there's different types of medication, and often where we go to get medicated, where we go and what we use and what we choose to medicate ourselves with is really where the danger lies. And, like I said, I reckon I'm medicated with sport and achievement. I reckon that I'm medicated with like drugs and alcohol. And now these days I medicate with stillness, mindfulness and awareness. Yeah. And honesty and authenticity. But either way, mate, I don't think anyone escapes this thing. No. And the diagnosis of whatever it might be, some of, like I keep going back to, some of the behaviours actually put up on a pedestal. You see workaholics, gymaholics that are out there that are overachieving and overperforming, and oh my God, how do you do it? How do you get so much energy? And I think that fine line that you talk about with relation to ego at Bronte and why we're doing it is actually really it's a fine line between what's healthy here and what's not. And the behaviours are relevant. Like the behaviour piece is irrelevant. It's actually what's the driving motivator behind it. And if I'm going to the gym, or working or picking up my phone to look at Instagram or drinking or eating to avoid sitting with self, then I'm still medicating.
Yeah.
And that can be, and that comes out in behaviour, sometimes manic behaviour, and then that manic behaviour is then diagnosed with ADHD or whatever the case may be, you know. It's a tricky one because people just want to be fixed, right? Like, I don't know how many times in this whole journey I've just said, give me a tablet so I can be fixed. Like, I just want it to stop. I want the noise to stop, you know?
Yeah.
It's not
if you look at, in this country, antidepressants is in $41 billion business. 9% of Australians are on antidepressants. You know, that number, you know, what I've read and what I'm, you know, hearing from, you know, leaders in psychology in this country are saying it should be around 1%. Like, there's definitely a need for, you know, pharmaceutical at some point, but the fact that it's so big and it's been overdiagnosed and and antidepressants being overprescribed. And I guess that's some of the research that we've done, obviously, with Macquarie University, or helped fund and support already, right? So, which is the things you do, and moving into this big 5 things that you can do to improve your mental health. And you know, what I'm finding interesting about this is that they're such broad statements, right? So the big 5 are meaningful activities, healthy thinking, goals and plans, healthy routines, and social connections. Okay, I'm going to go out and get on the piss with my mates. There's a good social connection.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe that's not quite right. So, but like coming back to what you said, right? Like that's how do we self-medicate ourselves? And like, if they've already proven that if they've got people who are scoring high on the depression line, meaning that they're not depressed, but you know, they're over 80 out of 100, below 20 you're clinical depressed, right? So out of 100, if they're over 100, if they've forced people to stop doing those 5 things, within 10 days they were below 20. And more interestingly, it took them 32 days to get back to.
I'm not surprised.
Right, so like that stuff's so interesting, but then, you know, continuing to do that work and continue to work out what that looks like and how to do it that's effective for you is you know, is the next step. So, you know, speaking of the big 5, we've got a little thing called the Fast Big 5. So I'm going to ask you 5 questions. You need to ask them as quickly as you can and as shortly as you can. And I know that's going to be an issue because, God damn, you're good at telling the story.
I've written them down. Just to keep them.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Actually, before we go, I had a great little tidbit for you. So it's funny how, and it'd be interesting to hear your response to this. It's funny how you remember things from when you were younger, that you used to, or that you got taught by, you know, whether that was a parent or a coach or something, of a little thing to do to get yourself in the zone and get yourself ready to go and motivate you, or how to calm yourself down. I had this thing only last week with Sammy, my partner's boy's 16. He's getting into, you know, the hard exams and stuff, and he can suffer from a little bit of anxiety going into those things. And I'm like, I need to share what I used to do before my exams and stuff like that, which was this breathing technique, which was deep breath in, deep breath out, hold it for as long as you can, and then breathe. Because obviously holding your breath out for as long as you can, the body starts to go into, holy hell, what the hell's going on? Go back to normal breathing and you're switched on, it increases focus and that sort of stuff. So, are you ready?
Can I stretch some legs into that for you as to where that comes from?
Yep, go.
So it's quite primal. What you've just explained there is not quite primal, it is primal. And if you can imagine a baby, and we're just sort of, we're just trained out of this type of behaviour as humans these days. It's sort of beaten out of us. If you can imagine a young child, very young baby, crying hysterically, that's breath work, that's a baby breathing. And then what will happen is I'll slowly calm down, but with that calm down comes this behaviour. You see it with kids. Yeah, and you listen to Huberman. Huberman even talks about take 3. Yep. So what you're doing is it's the body's ability. It's just the body. It's natural. It's primal. That's exactly how I started here. So you know, the breath is astonishingly powerful in order to regulate a system. You know, you talk about medication, how we medicate, and the breath is extremely powerful. So it's definitely good advice that you're giving the young fella there.
Yeah. I tell him also to do it before he goes on to play the drums in his band.
There you go. There you go.
Get amongst it. All right, the fast big 5 questions. Are you ready to go? What is one thing?
Yes.
What is one thing you try to do every day that you truly believe in?
Be still.
Name one thing that happened this week that was less than perfect but perfectly okay.
Letting my daughter sit in discomfort without leaning in and trying to fix it for her.
What is one goal you set and then achieved that gave you a lot of fulfillment?
Weekly service at Bronte, 5:30 a.m. every Tuesday.
Yeah. Give me one part of your morning or evening routine that you can't live without.
Radical self-acceptance.
Tell me about one conversation you had this week that made you feel really good.
Yeah, my sister. I had a chat with my sister, and you know, I just want to. Can I just use this as an opportunity to say heaps of words? You know, a couple of weeks ago, I was sitting on my sister's couch at her house. Her husband and herself were sitting at the kitchen table doing something, and I was on the couch, and my kids and nieces and nephews were playing in the backyard, and I was sitting there by myself, and had this rubbish going around in my head that I'm being inconvenient by being at my sister's house. My kids are making a mess. We're eating their food. This negative self-talk. And I left my sister's house, actually flew away for business that night, and I got away to where I was going to, which was out in the middle of New South Wales in Moree, and I landed in Moree and started to cry when I was driving to the airport. I felt lonely and confused and upset. I just sat with it. I didn't beat my way out of the discomfort or anything. And I got a text message that night off my sister saying to me, "Hey, mate, I just want to let you know that it's so nice to have you so at peace and comfortable to hang out at our place on a Sunday afternoon." And, I'm sitting there. And so the conversation that ended up happening was only yesterday with my sister when I shared with her what was actually going on for me. Yeah. What it allowed for me to do is it allowed for us to accept that two people can be in the same situation but have two totally different experiences. And my experience at that time was one of self-doubt, deprecation, horrific self-talk, lies, fake news, like the fake news that goes on in my head, right? And my sister's experience was totally different. So by having these conversations, by being authentic, by showing up, and by speaking our truth, it allows a window in to both sides. My sister got a window in to me as to what goes on for me, but I got a window into her as well because she shared her authenticity back again. And I think that's a lot around what's missing, and that was what's so wicked about that conversation with my sister, is that we both showed up authentically. We got through the rubbish to start with. How's work? How's the kids? That stuff, you know? Yeah. We've all got little doors that we can open up to allow people in. And what I'm finding is that if I open my door and allow someone in, it opens up their door and I get to peek in them as well, and that's where intimacy is built.
Unbelievable. Well, mate, we've gone for 45 minutes. I knew we wouldn't fucking stay to the half an hour. But before we go, I just want to obviously give another massive thank you to you. You've become a huge part of the Mental Wheels Foundation and a very valued, believer and supporter of what we do. So I want to say thank you for that. Also, we just need to pitch the old sit-up challenge. We've got unbelievable, so last Tuesday went down for an ice bath with Alex and the crew. The entire crew got some sit-ups done, joined onto the challenge, which was fantastic. GG started up a team at a school, which is awesome.
Legend.
Yeah. How old's GG, do you reckon?
Mate, she's year 7, so she'd be 12 or 13.
12 or 13. So a little quick story about GG. She, me and my mate Robbie Allen, he's a cyclist, a very good cyclist. We go down, try and get down on the Tuesday morning. We jumped in and GG talked us through it. Got in front of us, gave us some motivational words, told us to breathe. It was just very cute, but also just, yeah, really beautiful. And then she obviously jumps in the ice herself. So, yeah, super special. Yeah. So if you're out there, jump on the sit-up challenge, 66 sit-ups, 21 days, invite 6 friends. Got any final words?
Yeah, get amongst it. This is where change happens, right? Change happens through people getting stuff done, and you guys at the Mental Wheels Foundation, the whole crew, that's what you do. You get stuff done, and it helps people like me, help people like others like me. So keep doing that.
Unreal. All right, brother. Love you.
All right. Love you too. See you guys.
See you later. And
all right. What do I do?
Do I do anything? Oh, you just stay there and smile.
Okay.
Yow!